Another update on this little KT250. Turns out there is a sandblasting company just 200 meters down the road, a little industrial area, and there are some people who work there. So I literally walked down the road with the frame, and they were able to blast the frame and the swing arm for me, and they also painted it just gloss black. Not sure exactly what sort of paint they used, but they suggested just leaving it sitting out in the sun for a week or so, just to let it fully harden, fully cure. So that's what I'm doing. It came up great. The only damage to the frame, apart from where the kickstand mounted on the swing arm, was a dent in the bottom plate, and that was easy enough to fix. The rest of it looks pretty good. Let's see. I think, well, it's very sunny, so I'm not sure what we can see, but I redid the mount for the kickstand. The rest of it looks good. The wheels, I'm slowly cleaning those up. I need to get those tires off, which means I think I have to break the little bead lock, the things that help hold everything in place. I'm not exactly sure how these work, but these things, I think I need to take those off. So I've been treating the rust on these. Once I get the tires off, I might actually put them in an electrolytic bath, do electrolytic rust removal, but I still need to clean them. They've been pressure washed several times and they're still covered in grime, so I've got some degreaser. I'll have to degrease everything. I'm looking at getting new bearings and seals. I think these are pretty common bearings, 6201s, something like that. The front wheel has two different size bearings, but again, they're pretty common and fairly cheap as far as I can tell. I need to get them out to make sure I get exactly what they are. Everything else looks good on those. I'll just have to clean them up. Once I remove the rust from the spokes, I'll have to figure out how I'm going to treat them. I'll probably just paint them just so they don't rust again. The engine needs a good clean, but I'm not going to open it up. So I've got, again, lots of carb cleaner and degreaser. I just need to go over it. I've made blanking plates for the inlet and the exhaust to stop anything going inside there. This was, I don't even know if you can tell the difference really. That was just a quick go with a wire brush and it comes up really, really well. The rest of it's just covered in muck, so it just needs a good cleanup. Carburetor I've already done. Other small bits and pieces I've just been cleaning up and painting. So that's the airbox. There's a little bracket up here which goes underneath the rear mudguard and helps bolt all of that together. Those are my new tires. The new front sprocket turned up. I'm still waiting on the shocks to arrive and the dust covers for the front forks. I've cleaned up this. I believe this bottom bearing has been replaced. I think that sounds like that's a common modification, that people put a tapered bearing in the bottom there. That's all fine, that cleaned up well. The top bearing surface has a little bit of pitting on it, but I've cleaned it up as best I can. The top one's not quite so critical because of course all the weight is sitting on the bottom. So I'll clean everything up and put it back together and see how it feels. This has all just been cleaned up and degreased and tidied up. All the bolts are put back in. They went through the ultrasonic cleaner. They've all got copper seize on them, copper grease rather, anti-seize. The internals have all been cleaned up. I ended up getting a new bottle of Evapo-Rust. That's this stuff. In New Zealand it's recently been sold, or CRC have bought the rights to it, so it's branded like this now. And it's kind of interesting. The big hardware type shops, Bunnings and Mitre 10, have it for about 50 bucks a container. It's a 5-litre container. Super Cheap and Repco, who are the car parts suppliers, have it as well, but they seem to have it for $75 for the exact same thing. I actually got this from Farmlands up the road, which was good for $55, I think. So I've been using that. The old stuff had worn out, but I used that on the fork tubes themselves and all the internals, including the springs and all the bits and pieces, and a bit hard to see in the plastic bags, but they came up as new. So the outers I've just cleaned up. I'm not going to go too mad polishing them or anything. I just want them clean. The insides are clean. I need to get a new copper washer. I'm a bit annoyed because I went out today. This is the bolt, the sealing bolt that goes in the bottom, and it's got a little copper washer on it. Only one of them had the copper washer, so I went to buy new ones, and I found them, and somewhere in the shop I must have lost them because I didn't get charged for them, and I didn't have them when I came home. So they must have dropped out of the little shopping basket maybe. So that's a bit annoying because I can't finish these off, but I'm not close to needing them at the moment anyway. And the front forks. Now these were a problem because of the rust pitting. So what I decided to try and do is you just need a smooth surface so that the oil seals don't get ripped up when these are going up and down. So these are upside down at the moment. So luckily most of the rust was actually in this top section, which doesn't affect the seals. This is the section here that sits up here. So rust there doesn't really matter, it just looks bad. So I was thinking of filling them with epoxy and then sanding it all back. And then I decided to try something else, which is using a silver primer. So this stuff is from Repco, and it's got a lot of metal in it, and it's the right color, and it's obviously it's anti-corrosion. So what I did yesterday is just built up layer upon layer upon layer of that stuff. It doesn't matter if it runs, you want it to run into all the little holes and the little rust pits. I also put these in the Evapo-Rust to get any rust out of the little holes, and that worked really well. So the idea is now I'm going to wet sand these and take most of that paint off again, and hopefully just leave the paint in the little rust pits that were left. And hopefully that'll make it smooth enough that it doesn't rip up the seals, and it's more or less the same sort of color. I mean, it's silver, so that's close enough. This is why I've got my tub of water here, so I can wet sand things. And I'm going to use 1000 grit and then 2000 grit, wet and dry. I'll give that a go, see how that goes. But everything's looking like it's coming along nicely. Another quick update on the bike. I got the tires off the rims. I ended up just cutting them off. I'm not going to reuse them. I'm not going to reuse the tubes. And I'm glad I did take those off because you can see the inside of them is a bit of a mess. I'll get new rim bands as well. I think what I'll do is set up a electrolytic rust removal bath and just rotate the wheels through that. Probably take a week or so, but that's okay, there's no rush. That's where these big plastic tubs come in handy. I use these for all sorts of things. So cleaning stuff, you can see it's quite filthy. When I was wet sanding, I was using that as my water supply for the forks. So what I'll do is I'll set the rims up in that. Obviously I can't do the whole thing at once, but you can do it a little bit at a time. That should be fine. I also managed to get the bearings out of the center. Oh, hello Milo. So I knocked out the bearings and the seals. They're sitting in the ultrasonic cleaner at the moment, buzzing away. I also, these are the things that help hold the tire on, I believe that's what they're for. So I'm not sure if those are supposed to be bonded to the little metal shoes, but they fell off basically. So the metal shoe part are now sitting in the ultrasonic cleaner along with the bearings and other bits and pieces. I don't think I'll reuse the bearings, everything was pretty gummed up. I don't think anything's been changed forever. They weren't actually sealed bearings. I can get modern sealed bearings, I think, which will be a lot better. But at least once they're clean, I can see what the numbers are on them. And what else? A few more coats of paint on the airbox. I do have other bits and pieces I need to clean up, so that's another part of the sort of a guard that goes between the rear wheel and the engine that needs cleaning. Everything still needs degreasing and cleaning, especially the rear wheel. I guess it's because everything gets covered in chain oil and you end up with a really sticky, gooey mess of dirt and oil and grime. Same on that. That needs a really good clean still. This is the chain guard. There's a little bit of damage on it. I should be able to straighten that out and fix that. This should clean up okay, and then it just needs a coat of silver paint. It's just this bit that I need to fix, but that should be pretty easy. That's simple metalwork. Now the forks. I can't remember if I mentioned before about the Evapo-Rust that CRC have now taken it over, and you can also get it in a can, but this isn't Evapo-Rust. So you have to be really careful. This is just phosphoric acid in a gel, which is useful. It's handy stuff, but it's not actually Evapo-Rust. It's not the reaction that Evapo-Rust uses, which is a non-acidic reaction, chelation I think it's called. It's a chemical reaction that bonds with the rust and removes it. So this is still useful, but I prefer the other stuff. The forks, so you can see pretty clearly where the paint is where the rust pitting was. So the paint has filled all of those little pits and holes. This is the top of the forks. This isn't the worst bit. Sort of down here where the forks actually move, where the oil seal has to go past. And you can see it's not too bad. That actually worked pretty well. It took a lot of sanding to get everything off. I did try coarser grit, which does work. The forks are hard chromed and they're very, very hard. So you don't have to worry too much about scratching them. And you end up going with finer and finer grits of sandpaper anyway, so everything gets smoother and smoother. But I recommend using a wooden block and sanding it with that, and only sanding up and down, not round and round, because the oil seal slides up and down. So if you do get any scratches in it, you want them going up and down this way, not round the tube, which will just rip the seal to bits. So you can see these because the paint's a slightly different color, and you can feel them, but they're not rough. It's pretty smooth. I've gone over these with 2000 grit, and I've actually tested them with one of the oil seals. I've oiled that up, and you can manually slide that up and down. You can feel that it's pretty smooth. It's not going to grab the seal or rip anything up. The actual area of motion on the seal is only down here at the bottom. So they've come up pretty well. My cable ties, by the way, are so that I know which set of parts go in which fork. I've kept them separated. I've written on the bags. That one's 2 ties, so that goes inside this one. I don't know that it really matters, but it's always better to put things back where they came from. You're not going to have any problems then. The other thing I did when I stripped the wheel is, of course, I took the rear sprocket off. So this is an original one. They're steel, pretty hefty. You can get new ones which are cut from aluminium. So I've got those, but the difference between them is this has a step on it. It's kind of dished. It's a bit hard to see, but it's not flat. So when you use these modern replacement ones, you have to put a spacer behind them. But I've been looking at this. This one's brand new, and I thought these were fairly worn. They seemed fairly sharp to me, but they actually match the new one pretty closely. The interesting thing is, I think when, let's see, yeah, you have to get the right position to get these to line up. But if you get them to line up, I need to clean this to actually see what the wear on the teeth is like. But I don't think that's too bad. It's pretty pointy. Those are kind of much the same. In which case, I'm going to reuse the original sprockets. Again, this will be a very, very low mileage bike. I mean, it'll take me years to put a couple of miles on it probably. So I can reuse these. I've got a new chain to go on it. But if I can reuse the original parts, I will. I'll just keep all of these aside as, you know, a rebuild kit for the next person, I guess. But yeah, that should be fine to reuse. It needs all wire brushing and cleaning. Again, everything's covered in filth, but if I can reuse it, I will. And I think that's pretty much it on the bike. I haven't started cleaning the engine. The frame's been sitting out in the sun for a while. I'm probably not going to get to it during the week, so I'll leave it for another week. And hopefully then the paint's all nice and hard and I can start reassembling things. I am still trying to figure out if I can actually get a new top bearing for this, but I haven't actually figured out what the numbers are for the bearings. People do sell them on eBay. You can even get them on AliExpress. I'm not sure I would trust those. I want to find out what the number is of that bearing to see if I can get a decent quality one. So if someone knows what this top, it's kind of like a loose roller bearing is. So that's the top of it. The bottom of it's in the top of the tube on the frame. I'd really like to know, because if I can replace it with a decent one, I will. I don't think those bearings are that expensive. They're not that hard to find and that expensive. So it's probably sensible to do it while I've got everything apart. The other thing I found is I do have some fork oil. I can't remember why I bought this. There was some reason I was playing with different oils. Some other project years and years ago. I've got all sorts of different types of oil for some reason, and that was one of them I'd tried. But this is the right spec fork oil to go in these, so I'll be able to put those all back together soon. Hopefully I can start doing that during the week now I've actually finished these. I am still waiting for the dust caps. They're coming from a company in the UK, but there's no tracking information, so I'm not sure what's happening there. But yeah, I think the little bike's coming along well. Just got all the bits and pieces out of the ultrasonic cleaner. I still haven't figured out the best stuff to use in that. So these are alloy and they're still filthy. Steel things come out okay. They do turn a bit black, but you sort of wire brush that off and it comes up fine. Definitely cleans them. These are the spacers out of the axles. These are the bolts that hold the rear sprocket on. Little nuts and bolts and lock washers. I'll get new ones of those or make new ones of those, and I want to reuse them. I think they've been reused a couple of times. These are the dust seals. These seem okay. I can probably get a number of those and replace those. I have no idea what that stuff is inside this one, but I did write down the numbers of the bearings. I actually had to go get a little magnifying glass because eyesight isn't what it used to be. But these are the two rear bearings. They're 6302s. The front has two different size bearings. One is a 6301 and the other one is a 6201. So these are unsealed bearings, obviously. I'm going to replace them with, I think the spec is 2RS DDU, something like that. Basically means they come sealed for life with dust shields. So that's what I'll get, in which case you probably don't really need these, but if I can't get new ones of those, I can reuse these because the bearings are going to be good anyway. Some things, the ultrasonic cleaner, the stuff I've got in there at the moment, works really well. So this is the kickstand spring, and it just cleaned up perfectly. So I'll see if I can order those. I've got a bearing place I've used that's fairly local. It's in Wellington. They've been excellent. They've been able to find almost every bearing I've ever needed or asked for, including some weird ones for the Riley in the past, and my Austin 7 as well, I think. So I'm pretty sure these bearings are really common. I don't think these are difficult at all. So I'll ring them and see what they say. I'll also get the numbers off the dust shields and see if they can supply those as well. The oil seals rather.